The wide marble floor of the Galactic recruitment hall gleamed under cold blue lights. Lines of recruits from every corner of the galaxy waited for their turn, shifting nervously under the stares of armored guards when the human stepped forward. The room seemed to grow quieter. He was tall, but not bulky, his uniform plain, his hands empty. The alien officer behind the desk, a scaled creature with golden eyes, scanned him from head to toe. A slow, mocking smile spread across its face. "Name?" the officer asked without looking at the datapad. "Daniel Reeve," he replied, voice calm. The officer tapped something on the screen, then raised an eyebrow. "Human. Standard Earth. Colony. No special combat records. No advanced tech implants. No high genetic grade." The voice was sharp and cold. A few other recruits chuckled under their breath. "I can fight," Daniel said simply. The officer leaned back, staring at him like one might stare at a broken tool. "We don't need fighters. We need soldiers. You, human, are average. Weak by council standards, no elite training, no enhancements, not even a single medal. You'd be eaten alive in your first skirmish." One by one, the officer checked boxes on the screen. Then with a sharp motion, it stamped the file and read. Letters rejected. The datapad's glow reflected the word across Daniel's face. A murmur ran through the hall. Some recruits shook their heads in pity. Others smirked, happy to see one more rival turned away. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't plead. Instead, he gave a small, almost careless smile. His dark eyes seemed to hold something the officer couldn't read. "Understood," he said softly and turned away. The alien officer called after him, voice dripping with mockery. "Don't take it too hard, human. Not everyone is meant for war." Daniel walked past the rows of recruits, ignoring their stares. In his pocket, under the fabric of his sleeve, his fingers brushed over a small sealed envelope. Inside was a document with black ink stamped across the top. Black command clearance. Eyes only. No one in this hall could know it existed. The council would never admit such orders were even real. Outside the hall, the air was colder, the sky above filled with the pale glow of distant space traffic. Daniel didn't walk toward the public barracks. He turned down an empty street, boots echoing against metal walkways until he reached a lift hidden between two supply towers. The lift door opened without a sound, as if waiting only for him. He stepped in, pressed a button marked with no label, and the lift began to sink deep underground. As the light faded, the hum of machinery grew louder. The walls of the shaft flashed past steel, then reinforced alloys, then something older, covered in dark scorch marks. Finally, the lift opened into a vast, dimly lit chamber. It smelled of oil, metal, and ozone. Shapes loomed in the shadows, enormous shapes. Massive starships rested in silence, their armor black as the void. Their hulls had no markings, no flags, no symbols of any government. A row of human engineers worked quietly along the docking rails, barely glancing up as Daniel stepped out. Here, there was no need for rank displays or salutes. They all knew who he was. A tall woman in a black flight suit approached, her voice low. "Commander, how did it go?" Daniel smiled faintly. "They think I'm worthless." The woman's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Good, then they won't be watching us too closely." He walked to the edge of the docking bay and looked out through the shielded hangar doors. Beyond, the dark side of the asteroid drifted in silence, hiding them from the eyes of every scanner in the system.
Out there, the Galactic Councils?
Fleets paraded their ships in the open, convinced they were the only true defense of civilization. Had no idea this place even existed. Daniel's hand rested on the railing, his voice quiet but certain. "Let them think I'm nothing? When the real war begins, they'll learn the truth." Far above, in the bright halls of the council, the rejection of one human meant nothing. Down here in the dark, it was the first move in a game they didn't even know had started. The hangar was alive with a quiet, controlled energy. Mechanics moved along the narrow catwalks above the ships, their boots ringing softly on metal. Sparks fell from a welding torch, lighting up the black armor of a heaviest Cruiser. Daniel walked through the rows. his eyes scanning every vessel like a commander inspecting soldiers. The ships had no bright colors, no polished finish, no ceremonial banners. They were built for one purpose: to fight and win without ever being seen until it was too late. He stopped beside a long, narrow warship bristling with hidden weapon ports. Its hull was layered with strange plating that shimmered faintly when the lights hit it. Shadow-class interceptor, the tall woman from before said, following his gaze. Fast enough to outrun any patrol ship in the galaxy. Cloak field. Tested at 98% success. Daniel nodded slowly. Good, we'll need them ready sooner than planned. She frowned. You think it will happen that quickly? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the central command platform. A group of officers waited there, gathered around a large holographic display of star maps. The projection flickered, with red dots scattered along the edges of explored space. As Daniel approached, they straightened, not out of ceremony, but because they knew. His presence meant decisions were about to be made. One of the younger officers spoke first. Commander, these are the latest deep space scans. The anomalies are getting closer. No official fleets have been sent to investigate. The Council is ignoring them. Daniel's eyes traced the red dots. They were not random. They formed a slow, deliberate arc, moving toward inhabited systems. How long until they reach the core lanes? He asked. Months, the officer replied. But if they speed up, it could be weeks. Daniel turned to face the group. We don't wait for weeks. We prepare now. The Council will keep laughing at ghost stories until those ghosts are at their door. A heavy silence followed. Every person here knew what he meant by ghosts. The rumors were old, older than the Galactic Council itself, a force that came from the dark between galaxies, a force that didn't conquer, didn't enslave. It erased. Entire worlds gone as if they had never been. The official name in human intelligence reports was the Null Swarm, but most called it something simpler: the End. Daniel tapped the console, zooming in on the largest red cluster. They've destroyed every civilization that tried to face them. Head on. The Council calls it a myth because they've never fought it. But humanity. Humanity remembers every war we've had to survive. We know myths are sometimes warnings. The tall woman stepped closer. You think they're coming here? Daniel's gaze hardened. No, don't think. I know. And when they arrive, the Council's fleets will be too slow, too proud, and too blind. That's why we exist. Round the table, heads nodded. Orders began to pass quickly. Ship crews were assigned to readiness drills. Engineers moved to load ammunition and fuel. Pilots were dispatched for silent training runs beyond the asteroid's shadow. But deep in Daniel's mind, he knew training might not be enough. This enemy was not like the rival species the Council was used to defeating. It was something older, colder, and relentless. They would have to fight it with speed, cunning, and weapons no one else dared to build. He turned and looked once more. At the fleet resting in the shadows, every ship here was invisible to the galaxy. Soon they would be the only thing standing between life and extinction, far above. The Council feasted in their bright towers, celebrating another year of peace. They had no idea their clock was already ticking. The black void of deep space stretched endlessly on the display screen, dotted with faint blue stars. Daniel stood at the front of the briefing room, his hands resting on the edge of the holodable. Around him, his senior officers waited, their faces lit by the soft glow of projected star maps. The red markers on the outer rim pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, creeping closer toward known space. These aren't random, Daniel said, his voice steady but heavy. They're moving in formation. A grizzled pilot with cybernetic eyes leaned forward. Formation. That far out? Commander, there's nothing alive that deep in the void. That's what they want us to believe, Daniel replied. But the swarm doesn't need to breathe. It doesn't need light. It doesn't even need rest. It just moves. Until there's nothing left to take. The room fell silent. One liked to say the name out loud, the Null Swarm. Most of the galaxy called it a bedtime story meant to scare rookies. But here, in the hidden base beneath the asteroid's surface, no one laughed about it. A younger officer brought up a grainy recording. The image flickered with static, showing a small mining station orbiting a lonely red star. Then, without warning, the video filled with a cloud of black shifting shapes. The station's lights blinked out one by one. No explosions, no debris, just nothing. The recording ended in silence. "That was 20 hours after the first contact," the officer explained, his voice low. "We never recovered any bodies, no transmissions after the blackout. It's like they were erased." Daniel's jaw tightened. "The council has seen this. They filed it under equipment malfunction." A bitter laugh came from the pilot in the corner. "Of course they did. Can't have the people scared while they're busy showing off parade fleets." Daniel ignored the comment and tapped the halotable again. "This is why we've been building in the shadows. Council's fleets are built for show, for intimidation against rivals they already understand. The swarm is something else. We have to fight them our way, fast, quiet, and ruthless." The tall woman from the hangar leaned against the table. "Weapons testing is nearly complete. The rail cannons work, but we'll need more antimatter shells if we want to break their shields." Daniel nodded. "Triple production. I want every pilot running silent drills outside the system. No signals, no comms. The swarm detects us too early, we lose the element of surprise." The officers scattered to follow orders. Daniel lingered, staring at the red dots still crawling across the star map. They looked small and harmless here, but he knew each represented something vast and merciless. They didn't conquer worlds for resources or prisoners. They simply removed them from existence, leaving empty orbits and dead suns behind. Somewhere, deep inside him, a thought pressed against his calm exterior, the memory of Earth's own near-extinction wars. Humanity had been underestimated before. Enemies had called them reckless, fragile, weak, and yet humanity had survived every time, not because they were stronger, but because they refused to stop fighting. That was the one thing the swarm didn't understand. Daniel stepped away from the holotable and looked toward the hangars. Dark expanse, where the fleet lay in silence. Soon, the galaxy would learn the truth. And when that day came, he intended for humanity to be the last wall standing. Above them, far across the stars, the red markers moved closer. The hunt had already begun. The summons from the Galactic Council arrived in the form of a sleek silver drone that descended into the asteroid's hidden docking bay without warning. Its mechanical voice echoed through the hangar, cold and official. "Commander Daniel Reeve, you are ordered to appear before the Council immediately. Charges: unauthorized military activity, possession of unregistered warships, and inciting unrest." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel simply gave a faint smile as if he had been expecting this. Without hesitation, he stepped into the drone's transport capsule. The doors closed, sealing him inside, and the craft shot into space with the speed of a missile. Hours later, the capsule entered the bright, gleaming heart of the galactic core, the Council's capital station. It was a floating city of glass towers and silver bridges, bathed in artificial sunlight. There were no shadows here. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. Shadows made powerful people uneasy. The council chamber was vast, a ring of high seats. Occupied by alien leaders from dozens of species, their voices filled the air in a steady murmur until the central platform lit up, placing Daniel in the center of their attention. A tall counselor with glistening blue skin leaned forward. "Commander Reeve," it said in a voice heavy with false politeness. "You have been operating outside the laws of the Galactic Defense Accord. We demand an explanation." Daniel stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes calm. "Explanation is simple. There's a threat moving toward us. Your fleets aren't prepared to face it." A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Another counselor, this one a scaled creature much like the officer who had once rejected him, smirked. "Ah, yes, the so-called Null Swarm. A human ghost story. We've heard it before. It's not a story," Daniel replied evenly. "You've already lost 2 colonies to it. You just buried the reports under other names." Laughter grew louder. One counselor waved a jeweled hand dismissively. "Even if such a thing exists, it is not for a human to decide our military strategy. You have stolen ships? Stolen? Resources I've built what you refuse to. Daniel cut in, his voice low but sharp enough to silence the room. You can mock me now, but when your cities go dark, when your fleets vanish without a fight, you will wish you had listened. For a moment, the chamber was still. Then the counselors erupted again, not in fear, but in outrage. Gavel slammed. Down from the central seat, you are hereby stripped of all official rank. Your operations are declared illegal. Any further actions will be considered acts of war against the council. Daniel didn't flinch. He simply looked up at the rows of alien faces and said, if survival is treason, then I'll wear the title proudly. 2 guards stepped forward to escort him out, but he walked ahead of them without resistance. Outside, the artificial sunlight felt colder than the void of space. The council believed they had ended his plans, when in truth they had freed him from every last thread of bureaucracy. By the time he returned to the asteroid base, his officers were waiting. The tall woman approached, reading his expression. They didn't believe you. They will, Daniel said, stepping onto the command platform. The swarm's vanguard will be here in days, no one argued. Around them, the Shadow Fleet was already coming to life. Engines hummed, weapon ports clicked into place, and the black holes began to drink in the faint light. Far beyond the asteroid's shadow, unseen by the Council's proud fleets, something vast was moving closer. The first distress signal came in the middle of the night cycle, a thin, broken transmission that crackled through the Shadow Fleet's comm network. Daniel was on the command deck when it arrived, leaning over a star map lit with quiet red warnings. The voice on the transmission was shaking, half lost in static. Colony Vera 9 ships. Black shapes, no sound, then nothing but dead air. A few seconds later, another channel lit up. This one was from a merchant freighter near the colony. The image was grainy and unstable, but the horror was clear. The sky above Vera 9 shimmered with a black, writhing cloud. It moved like liquid and smoke at the same time, folding in on itself, splitting apart and reforming without pause. Where it touched the colony's defense towers, the towers simply vanished. No fire, no wreckage, just gone. Daniel's eyes hardened. Helm, get us moving. All squadrons to battle readiness. Silent launch in 2 minutes. The tall woman at his side hesitated. Commander, this will expose us. Once we fire, the Council will know we exist. They'll also know why, Daniel replied. We're not letting that colony vanish. Within moments, the hangar roared to life. Black warships slid from their berths, vanishing into the void as their cloaks engaged. The Shadow Fleet moved like a single organism, silent and invisible, engines barely whispering against the dark. When they arrived at Vera 9's orbit, it was already too late for most of the surface. Whole city sectors were gone, replaced by smooth craters where even the dust had been erased. The swarm's vanguard hovered above the planet, dozens of massive shifting constructs that seemed alive but made no sound. Target the nearest construct, Daniel ordered. Rail cannons, fire in sequence. The first volley struck like lightning. Invisible until the moment of impact, the antimatter rounds ripped through the swarm's outer shell. For the first time, the black cloud screamed, not through sound, but through a deep vibration that rattled the bones of everyone on the bridge. The Shadow Fleet pressed the attack. Interceptors darted between the constructs, firing into their cores before disappearing back into the void. The swarm's movements grew erratic, lashing out at empty space where the cloaked ships had been seconds earlier. For a moment it seemed they could win. 3 constructs shattered completely, their black matter scattering into harmless dust. But then the sensors screamed. The pilot at the controls turned pale. Commander, this wasn't the main force. These readings is just a probe group. On the tactical display, new red signatures bloomed in the distance. Hundreds of them, closing fast. The swarm's true strength was coming. It was far larger than anything the Council could imagine. Daniel didn't hesitate. Signaled the fleet. We've done what we can here. Pull back to the rally point. We need to be ready for the real fight. As the Shadow Fleet vanished once again into the darkness, the burning image of Vera 9 stayed with them, a warning of what the galaxy was about to face. And in the Council's shining halls they still celebrated, unaware that Their time was already running out. The Council's emergency call came 3 days later. This time there was no mocking tone, no dismissal. The transmission was short, the voice shaking. "Commander Reeve, Major Fleet now." Daniel stood on the command deck of the flagship, the dark expanse of space stretching before him. Around him, officers waited for his decision. For a long moment, he said nothing, letting the silence press down on the room. Then he turned toward the comms officer. "Tell them we'll fight, but under our own command. Humanity leads this war." And the Council agreed without hesitation. Daniel knew the fear had finally reached them. The Shadow Fleet broke cloak, revealing itself to the galaxy for the first time. Across hundreds of Council worlds, news feeds lit up with images of sleek black warships unlike anything in official fleets. For some, it was a shock. For others, a strange reassurance. The rendezvous point was the edge of a dying star system, its sun dim and bleeding red light. Here the swarm was already gathering, a vast wall of shifting black forms, stretching farther than sensors could measure. The Council's fleets hung back, glittering silver in the distance, their formations rigid and slow. The Shadow Fleet slid in front of them, moving like a predator stalking its prey. "Engage," Daniel ordered. The battle erupted in silence. Gosh. The swarm surged forward, its constructs twisting and breaking apart into smaller, faster hunters. The Shadow Fleet split into dozens of strike groups, vanishing and reappearing in perfect sync. Antimatter shells ripped holes in the enemy ranks. Rail cannons shredded their cores, and stealth torpedoes detonated deep inside the mass. From the bridge, Daniel could see the Council fleets trying to adapt, but they were too slow, too cautious. Every time they broke formation to pursue the swarm, they left gaps that could have been fatal. Gaps the Shadow Fleet filled without hesitation. Hours passed. Space itself seemed to burn with the light of weapons fire and the strange shifting. The glow of the swarm. Slowly, the black tide began to thin. When the last construct shattered into dust, silence fell across the comms. The Council ships floated motionless, their crews stunned. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge, his voice calm but carrying a weight that filled the room. "Signal. All fleets. The field is clear, for now." As the Shadow Fleet regrouped, alien commanders from across the galaxy sent private transmissions. Some with gratitude, others with a mix of awe and unease. In quiet corners of their ships, officers whispered a new phrase. Not an order, not a law, but a warning. Never reject a human again. On the dark edge of the system, Daniel watched the last traces of the swarm drift into nothing. He knew this victory was only a pause, not an ending. Somewhere in the deep void, the rest of the swarm still moved. But when it returned, the galaxy would remember who had stood between them and extinction. And they would know beyond doubt that humanity was ready to lead.